Darlene Lancer is a licensed marriage and family therapist and author of Codependency for Dummies, How to Speak Your Mind, Become Assertive and Set Limits, and 10 Steps to Self-Esteem, the Ultimate Guide to Stop Self-Criticism. Darlene maintains a private practice specializing in relationships and codependency. She has counseled individuals and couples for 25 years and coaches internationally. Darlene blogs on several internet mental health websites, including her own. This is our recent conversation.
Welcome to the Relationship Revolution. We have today Darlene Lancer, who was actually on my last summit. And Darlene, I am so thrilled that you were able to join us on this summit. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure last time, and I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Oh, great. You know, Darlene, you are one of the most prolific writers out there today when it comes to codependency. And I know there are a lot of people who've heard that term and they throw it around. And, you know, could you give us a definition of codependency?
Yes, I'd be glad to. It's misused a lot. A lot of people think that it's just somebody who's a caretaker or in a relationship with an abuser or alcoholic, and that's not really true at all. A lot of my clients are not in a relationship with an addict or being abused. So, but my definition includes addicts, which a lot of definitions don't, but that's universally true. A codependent is someone who can't function from their innate self. And instead, they organize their thinking and their behavior around someone else, or if it's an addict in the usual sense of the term, they organize their thinking and behavior around a substance. Or it might be a process like sex addiction or gambling, something like that, shopping. So they plan their activities, they're thinking about it, looking forward to it, trying to control it. You know, it's the same behavior, it's just a different subject matter. Mm-hmm. So that's my definition.
Great, thank you. You know, so, you know, the theme of this summit, you know, we're looking at paradox. We've been talking about embracing paradox and basically, you know, looking at the notion that there may be more than one truth to a particular situation or concept. What is the paradox of codependency from your point of view?
Well, it's very interesting that you say that, and shame is at the core of that. And the problem is that particularly codependents and the stereotypical codependent who relationships and love or romance is their primary focus. They keep seeking it, and they're seeking it to validate themselves because of their shame. But because of their shame, they don't allow it. So it's like running and chasing your tail, kind of, because they imagine that love from somebody else will make them happy. However, it's sort of a truism that you can only accept as much love as you give yourself. You'll only receive compliments graciously if you believe it. Codependents typically, certain kinds of codependents typically are uncomfortable with their power. So if they're put in a position of power, they feel very uncomfortable because they don't see themselves as powerful. So we want to be seen the way we see ourselves. We want somebody who feels bad about themselves, you know, will be drawn to somebody who can see that. If they feel bad about themselves and they're dating, for instance, someone who thinks they're great, they'll just think he's shallow, or he just doesn't know me well enough. or they're bored, not interested. They can't accept what they don't accept in themselves, and then they keep looking for it. But because they don't believe it, they're not loving themselves, they'll never really get it on the outside. So
that makes sense.
That's the paradox, is that they keep looking for it. And it's, I guess, based on the shame, and then people look for other esteem. Codependents want, someone, even someone who's might be a codependent, but their esteem is based on power or prestige. And so they keep, they could be the number one on the Forbes list of billionaires, but if someone else is number one the next year, their self-esteem drops. They don't feel like they've done enough. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, Darlene. So I want to just kind of cycle back a little bit. You gave us a very clear definition of codependency. I'm hoping dispelling some of the myths out there. How do people become codependent?
Well, it starts in childhood, and it's transgenerational. So if you have a codependent parent, it's very likely, I don't know if it's 100%, is like there isn't research on that, but it would be pretty unlikely that you wouldn't end up codependent. And you might have a grandfather that's an alcoholic. So you're, let's say, on your mother's side, and so then your mother is codependent, and then it's transferred through behavior. And it can also happen, let's say you don't have that history, but because of external circumstances or mental illness or something, your primary, caretakers, your parents usually, and more predominantly the mother often, because it can get started in the first year of life, is depressed. So she's not going to mirror her baby's affects. She may look away. She may be anxious. Maybe there was a lot of financial stress, or there was moves going on, or war, or other things, that were taking priority. And so she wasn't able to help her baby feel safe and be present to contain the baby's feelings in between feedings, meeting its needs, understanding what it wants. So, in this, sometimes I've observed, like, some mothers are very, looking into the baby's face and playing with it and doing all kinds of activities with it when the baby needs to be calm. So the mother is caught up in what she thinks the baby needs, or maybe if she's self-centered or codependent, she's not going to have a boundary. She's not going to see her baby as a separate individual, but as an extension of herself. A lot of young mothers, they want to have a baby because it's going to boost their self-esteem. And that's, the worst reason to have a child, because that means that they're going to use their baby to meet their own needs, and that sets up codependency. So that, in that example I gave, maybe the mother's extroverted and the child is introverted and can't stand too much stimulus.
Right.
So that would be a mismatch. And if the mother isn't able to see her baby as separate, then she won't be able to even read that the baby is feeling anxious by all the stimulation. So I've seen it in some children. They love to be outside when they're infants or toddlers, and the parents take them out, and they're so excited and interested in everything. But at home, they're like cranky or having tantrums. And then a sibling could be the reverse. And they are just like the model baby at home, and then you take them outside, and they're anxious, and they maybe have tantrums or something. It's just the reverse, because one is more sensitive to stimulation and overstimulation, and the other thrives on it, is like a born extrovert.
Right, right. And, you know, I see it, too, in my practice with children when the styles of, you know, how they relate to the external environment. You know, I've often spoken with, I see parents who are, let's say, introverted, or a mother who's introverted and she has an extroverted child. It's really difficult for her.
Yeah.
Because, you know, those are the kind of kids that, you know, they take up a lot of space with their energy.
Mm-hmm.
And they really wear out their mothers. Because she's just not used to, you know, navigating all that energy all the time.
Right. And then on top of that, in the early, you know, infant stages, and then you get to around, you know, 2.5, 3 years old, and babies need to separate.
Right.
And usually they're starting daycare or, you know, nursery school or something. So if a mother is anxious about letting them go or doing things on their own or overprotective, then a toddler starts to distrust themselves, and they might want to, you know, cling to the mother, sometimes to make the mother feel better. Mm-hmm. So they become fearful, because of the fear and the overprotection of the mother. And then it happens again as a teenager, and then leaving home, you know, for college or adulthood, and that inhibits the child's natural desire to individuate, to become a whole individual, autonomous, thinking, feeling person separate from their parents. And that's one of the core symptoms of codependency, is that someone who is not an autonomous whole self. Mm-hmm. So the parents can, by too much control or too much clinging and too much fear, they can inhibit it. Now, the reverse can be true, that a mother who doesn't really want to be a mother, and she feels drained by her children, and she wants to go back to work and everything, she may, you know, throw her children out of the nest too soon. And then they're anxious. They don't really know how to cope. They're not ready. And so then they feel insecure. They feel abandoned. So, you know, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. But if these, you know, mismatches or mistakes happen chronically or frequently enough, then they start to impair the child's, you know, developing identity and self. Then you put on top of that shame. And that is what's, you know, even more damaging. And in the example I gave of a depressed mother, it's been shown in studies that toddlers will blame themselves for their mother's depression. So when a mother looks away, or a child expresses a need or a feeling, and the mother, and it could be the father, doesn't meet it, ignores it, it's humiliating or embarrassing. And then if it happens enough, the child starts to repress those feelings and needs or deny them, think that they have to become self-sufficient, another typical trait of codependence. Or there could be, in a really dysfunctional home, the parents can overtly shame their children, and that will undermine self-esteem and the ability to love oneself as an adult, to feel self-trust and confidence and be successful and have good relationships if the parents are putting them down or comparing them to their brother, or how when I was a child it was such and such, you know. So making negative comparisons to themselves or to their siblings, or just out and out, you're never going to amount to anything, things like that. So nowadays, parents are trying harder to boost their children's self-esteem, and what they don't know is that global affirmations like, oh, you're wonderful, you're such a great son, things like that, doesn't raise self-esteem. It's helping their children accomplish things on their own, to build confidence that way, to make specific praises like, I really acknowledge that you got your homework done on time, things like that. But the reverse, these global praising teaches the child to make global statements about themselves. So if they're not good, they're bad. If they're not wonderful, they're terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that parents don't usually know, but studies have borne out.
Right. And the argument that you're actually making is that all of this that happens, through the developmental process, the wounding that's happening, it really does get played out in adult relationships, because that does not change. Children evolve through the various stages, because even if these tasks, the developmental task isn't accomplished at whatever stage, we still continue to move through, taking with us, all of those needs and that weren't met. And so it to me, it just sort of really clarifies the argument that what we don't get in childhood, we take with us, and it shows up in our adult relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people don't believe that. They don't understand that. They think, well, I'm good. I got everything I need. My childhood was perfect. And those are some of the people I know you see in your office, I see in my office. And just starting that conversation, is that, well, what's going on, what you're presenting with is really just the tip of the iceberg. The problem started long ago and far away.
It's true. And then a lot of people who had painful, families or experiences, they feel like they don't want to talk about it. It's like too painful, and now things are better, and they just don't want to go there because it is. But the pain, sometimes people come to therapy and they say, I don't want to talk about the past or my childhood or something. And my thought is, that's fine. I'm happy to talk about the present, but the past keeps reoccurring it keeps reoccurring. They keep replaying it until it's worked out. Although I do find that in talking about the present, it's usually, then it triggers the past. So, it doesn't matter. I think it's actually more helpful to start talking about the present and then see where it leads you backwards rather than starting in the past and trying to figure out, how it's manifesting.
Yeah, I agree. So Darlene, so what are some of, let me think here. So what are some of the biggest challenges that couples who identify as codependent or individuals who identify as codependent face? I mean, we may have been alluding to some of these challenges, but what are they, and how can they begin to work through some of these challenges?
Well, this new book that I'm writing will be out next year on shame and codependency really focuses on relationships, and I think it's the only book that has that focus for codependence and shame. And the main thing is that you're talking about how, childhood gets carried forward, and one of the main and destructive ways that it does is by, I call it our inner critic. And that voice, and it's usually a voice of a parent that gets replayed over and over in our unconscious and conscious minds. A lot of people aren't aware of it until they start working on themselves. And one of the things I ask them to do is start, writing down every day their negative self-talk. Mm-hmm. And that includes shoulds, by the way, because codependents are always thinking what they should do, what they should have done, or what they should not have said, or what they shouldn't do. So there's all these, dictates constantly that they're trying to comply with, and it's all from this voice of their inner critic. So that's one of the first things, because you can't change what you're not aware of. So increasing your awareness is the first step. And that is so detrimental to relationships. As I mentioned, to just attract love, you have to have self-esteem and feel good about yourself. But also how you relate to others will be affected. So if you have a negative self-image or have negative beliefs about yourself, as I said, it will be hard for you to hear compliments. And maybe you've seen this in your practice, where I've witnessed couples where, for instance, a husband is saying something positive to his wife and she hears it as negative. And I ask him to repeat it, and she still doesn't hear it. And it boggles my mind. And, of course, if they weren't in therapy, they would be arguing, till kingdom come about who said what and what was really said. Mm-hmm. So it really does happen that people distort perception. And classically, codependents are very sensitive to criticism, hypersensitive. And this is because of their own self-criticism. So not only do couples do this, as I gave the example, they'll think that they're being criticized, or they'll interpret it as a neutral thing, like husband is on the computer equals he doesn't care about me, or he's not helping me with something means that he doesn't feel that my needs are important. So they interpret just behavior as a feeling statement, and then they blame. The response is to blame and shame and criticize their partner. So they then have dysfunctional communication because of their own. That's how they talk to themselves. That's how they were raised, and that's what they learned. Assertiveness is learned, and lack of it is also learned. And so raising your self-esteem and becoming assertive are things that are learned in childhood, and it's not easy, but they can be, you can relearn better how to do it better, how to be more assertive, to raise your self-esteem. And actually that's why I specifically wrote two ebooks, one about how to raise your self-esteem and the others how to speak your mind, because I think these are two things that are people can start to work on by themselves and change, and it really makes a difference.
Thank you. So, Donna, I want to talk a little bit about shame without giving too much of your book away. My question is, are there differences between the way men and women experience shame?
Well, yes. Of course, we all have our unique sensitivities to shame based on our personality and upbringing, and other influences are our societies and our religion, our ethnic group, things like that. But gender does influence it. And men tend to value strength and emotional control and work, their virility. And so any sign of weakness or tears or incompetence, being unemployed, for instance, being inadequate sexually, can elicit shame in a profound way. On the other hand, women prize their beauty, most modesty, and thinness. Body appearance is very important. So they can feel very ashamed about any flaw in their appearance or their body type. So some of these are, as you can tell, are culturally influenced.
Yeah.
But also getting back to the relationships, intimacy is something that codependents have a big problem with.
Right. And that was sort of a nice segue into my next question.
Oh, okay.
So if someone is struggling with intimacy, like leaving a relationship or staying in it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners, there may be listeners out there who are, in this situation, the reason that it may be so difficult because, there are these unconscious forces at work. What might help them to begin to move through and get to the other side?
Well, there's many reasons to want to leave a relationship. Mm-hmm. So that might be specific to the particular situation. It could be infidelity. It could be one partner isn't providing any, carrying his or her share of the weight. It could be addiction. So I don't think there's like one way to address all those different issues. However, what I can speak to is a lot of people feel trapped and they can't, even though they think they should leave, or part of them wants to leave, they don't seem to be able to, and this is very typical of codependence. And that's often because they lack autonomy, getting back to what I said earlier. They don't have an individual self. Some people go from, college and they get married. Occasionally they're, their first sweetheart or something, or from their being dependent on their parents to finding someone, their true love, and they never go through the stage of being an autonomous, independent adult. So they often want to come to me to leave, but I say, but they can't even set a boundary. That's too scary to say no to their partner. So I always say, start with baby steps. A divorce is a huge decision, or leaving a long relationship can be a big decision. So start by doing that. And the other thing is codependents typically invest all their energy into their partner, and they may be enmeshed, which is that psychological term where there's no boundaries between the two, or very weak boundaries. It's the opposite of being autonomous. So they have to have a life to go to, not just leave and then they will be pulled right back in because they don't have their separate friends, they don't have separate interests or activities, hobbies, some don't work, and then they're facing not only divorce, but they have to enter the workplace for the first time, which is daunting, to a single mother or maybe a stay-at-home mother for years. So, I would say start to act as if you can still be faithful to your partner, but do what you would do if you were single. Mm-hmm. What's happened sometimes is that as clients become more autonomous, A, they're less reactive, B, their self-esteem grows, and then there's more separateness between the two of them, which is a positive thing, and so the intimacy improves, and then they're happier in the relationship, and the relationship improves. So this is another paradox, is that the more that you are a separate person, the more intimate you can become. The more autonomous you are, the more intimate you can become. Because instead of wanting to merge and then trying to change the other person to make you whole, you can see the other person as separate. And yes, they have weaknesses and they have strengths just like you do. And again, it starts with accepting your own weaknesses and strengths. And then you can, accept that in someone else. You don't need a relationship to make you whole. So you don't have to control the other person. You can live and let live, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that saying.
I love that phrase, too.
I love that phrase. We're going to be out of time shortly, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your upcoming book. I think you wrote me and said that it's going to be released next year in June.
That's the plant date so far.
That's the date so far. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure our listening audience are very excited. And congratulations, Darlene, on this new book.
Thank you.
Did you want to talk more about it?
A little bit, yeah. It's being published by Hazelden, which some people may know as they are a big foundation that is the biggest publisher in the field of recovery for people with codependency and addiction. And it starts with an overview of shame and how that differs from guilt and how it is in other societies, and then takes it through how we become codependent, how shame becomes internalized for codependents, so that they don't need someone else to shame them anymore like they were in their childhood. They do it to themselves.
Right.
They don't even need a partner to do it. They just, between them and themselves. So it becomes internalized. And then underneath that is emptiness. And that is what people are most afraid of. And that makes them cling because they're always running from their emptiness with addictions, including relationships and things like that. And the defenses to shame and how we can overcome our defenses to be more authentic and relate as be vulnerable and relate to each other honestly, and how that comes out in relationships, and how shame permeates all of the traits of codependency. And finally, it's called 8 Steps it's conquering shame and codependency, 8 steps to free your true self. So there's a huge section on exercises and things you can do to really lessen your shame and build your self-esteem and self-worth and heal your past and your relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in doing all of that gets transmitted, to children and to partners and communities and to the world.
Absolutely.
So it sounds wonderful, Darlene. Congratulations.
Thank you. I always tell go ahead.
Huh?
I always tell parents they want to say often, like, how can I help my children? The first step is to heal yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Because it comes out our behavior comes out unconsciously.
Exactly.
They model us.
They do. Darlene Lancer, thank you for being a guest expert on the Relationship Revolution. Can you let our listening audience know how they might follow your work?
Thanks very much. Well, my websites are my name, DarleneLancer.com, and whatiscodependency.com. And you can also follow me. I post daily with a lot of articles, not only mine, and information and tips on overcoming codependency, and that's on Facebook, my name, or Codependency Recovery. I think even just the word codependency should take you to my page. And if you have any questions or want to contact me, my email is info@darlenelancer.com. And on my website, if you like, you could sign up and I will send you 14 tips for letting go, which is free. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Darlene. Once again, it's a pleasure speaking with you and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with our listening audience. And congratulations again on your upcoming book.
Oh, you too, Paula. Thank you. It's just a pleasure being able to share with your listeners and to help people. This is really why I'm doing this work. So thank you for the opportunity.